Hey guys, welcome back to another week of an injury wrap up. We had a bit of a break last week after starting out, but we're back. This is your host, Sirhan from Physio Scout, and we've also got Jared. How are you today, mate?
Saran, how are you? Yeah,
I'm
part of
good.
that was my fault last week. I was traveling in both the UK and Dublin, Ireland. I saw my first Premier League game live. It was Chelsea, as you all know from last week, who I support. Got absolutely trounced by Everton at the new Hill Dickinson Stadium. But honestly, it was an incredible experience. I'm sure any of you who have been to Premier League games. It's just yeah, it's hard to put into words, but it was awesome. So, but yeah, part of why we did not do this last week is because I was on holiday, as you all say.
Hey, absolutely. We can't really blame Jared too much for that, and I also can understand because I went to my first Premier League game earlier on this year as well. So, again, like I was saying, we both lost our Premier League virginities, but it was awesome. Great feeling, great for the outside person who doesn't live in UK. It's just honestly breathtaking experience. Whether your team loses or wins, for a neutral, it was great. So. Even sitting at the Spurs end while they lost, it was still a nice feeling. But absolutely, we're back this week, and we tried new microphones, to no avail. But we're going to do a couple more test runs prior to next week. But apart from that, what we're going to go through a lot of injury news this week with mainly Arsenal, but a lot of other things as well. Maybe some gamesmanship. But apart from that. I think before the Zoom meeting ends, let's get straight into it. So yeah, international break and a week that we missed, including sort of news like Reece James as well. So a lot to touch on. But over the international break, we saw a lot of Arsenal players pull out, right? First one I do want to talk about because it's the most recent is Hincapie, who had a bit of knee discomfort, is what it's described as from Fabrizio Romano. The good thing is that he actually did jog off the pitch when he got substituted, which is great. Jared, have you seen much of this situation? And if there's anything that you can think of, would you mind providing your expertise?
Of course. Yeah, I didn't see the video live or anything like that, but yeah, this is, as you mentioned, gamesmanship. This seems to be something there. Again, how severe it is, probably on the lower side, but they always say, these clubs are paying these players salaries regardless of how much they want to be involved in international duties, stuff like that. So, um, yeah, my guess is there's some type of just whether it's just a mild contusion or like you said, mild knee discomfort, stuff like that. So do believe something is there, but not enough that's going to keep him out long term. And with Arsenal fighting for, unfortunately, the Premier League championship, yeah, probably Arteta is just being a little extra cautious here.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, it looks to be some sort of muscular problem or some probably joint inflammation. He did pull up at around the halfway mark and had to be subbed off a little bit later. So more pointing towards discomfort more than anything, which is usually quite a quick recovery. I don't expect him to miss more than a game or two at the very max. So next Arsenal match, I would presume he would be 50%, if not fully available, just based off a guess. Next one I do want to move on to is Eberechi Eze, who missed Arsenal's League Cup final, and he was confirmed out with a calf injury. So a little bit more, I guess, certainty on what the injury was with a calf strain. And he's looking at a 4 to 6 week mark as of last week, right? So 4 to 6 weeks usually points towards a grade two calf strain, just to be more generalized. In terms of as a big loss for Arsenal, isn't it, Jared?
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely been on a roller coaster of a season. There was that hat trick game against Tottenham earlier in the year, and then he seemed to kind of just disappear for a couple weeks, couple months when Ødegaard came back from injury. But now it seems like Arteta is favoring him a little bit more, and obviously with a calf injury for a player who's very quick and shifty, relies a lot on his agility. definitely can be a concerning injury moving forward. Anytime you lack that kind of quick push off from the calf, especially with a grade two injury, that can definitely impact the what makes him a special player. So be interested to see how Arteta brings him back into the lineup and just how effective he is moving forward. Because yeah, they definitely need his creativity. It seems like you know times they struggle, they just are, they can't unlock these low blocks, and he's a player who can do that, game in, game out.
Absolutely. You saw his strike a couple of weeks ago. That went straight into the top bins. He provides Arsenal a little bit of a an extra spark that their team might not have. Maybe he might have the keys to be able to do, to freelance, to free roam and do his own thing a little bit more than the other Arsenal players. So absolutely big loss for Arsenal. But he will be available for the run in around like the last 3 or 4 weeks into the season. Hopefully, he can get back a little bit earlier. Sometimes these calf strains do recover a little bit faster, and especially when there is a timeline, he could come back in the 3 to 4 week mark. But we shall see. Next one, I do want to move on to Noni Madueke, and he was injured off in the England international duty. A little bit of a funny one here because I did have a little bit of a Google search just to make sure if there was any updates, and Football.London, big British newspaper, did come in with a report calling me a self-proclaimed injury analyst. Or analyst, so on Twitter. And yeah, it says Physio Scout on X, formerly known as Twitter, reviewed the incident and speculated the severity of the knock. What I did see on the video was that it seemed to he seemed to have been striked from a defender, and it was a really high velocity challenge, which eventually got him into the ground with I don't even know how to describe it. It was more of a valgus force, meaning that his knee did turn in. Usually, one or two things happen there. Either that initial strike caused a really painful contusion to his knee, or that landing on the ground that put his knee into a valgus force usually is an indication more so of an MCL injury. With the MCL injury, I do think that's more likely because he did walk off of a knee brace, as we saw in the sheds, right? And with a knee brace, that allows an MCL or any sort of ligamentous injury to sort of grow back with stability. So with a knee brace, you would assume some sort of instability in the knee. My guess, if I was to guess, would be more of a grade one, grade two. He did try to play on, but obviously did not. But yeah, I guess would you happen to agree? Did you see the incident and what does this mean for Madueke, Jared?
Yeah, no, I did see the video. So yeah, too bad because they've been using him, kind of a deputizing role with Saka on that wing. Obviously for an NTL standpoint, his one of his main assets is speed. So planting and pushing into that acceleration is going to be tough when he gets back. I agree with everything you said. Yeah, anytime you see that big knee immobilizer, again just to provide some stability for the knee. For our listeners, it's interesting. Usually, MCL injuries in isolation will not require any type of surgical intervention. At least that's how they're handled here in America. Um, I'm assuming that's, like you said, that's where he is right now, isolated MCL injury, or just more of a bone bruise as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Same over here in Australia. Usually some sort of immobilizer does do the job as long as it's not a high grade MCL injury. Again, we're still speculating. We don't know if it's an MCL injury, and there does need to be further assessment. If it's a low grade, we could see him come back as soon as 1 or 2 weeks if we're really pushing it. But just with how it happened, I would assume it's a little bit higher grade on that. But yeah, we'll move on to Zubimendi, who also was seen with some knee strapping or knee taping around that patella tendon area, as well as a medial strap as well. Again, medial strap we have no idea what it is. Could be some joint irritation. It could be some localized pressure that was needed around that knee joint just to provide a little bit of pain relief, which actually does help quite a lot of the time around that knee joint. So maybe he just did come in with some discomfort in training and he just requested some taping. That it could be as brief as that. But obviously, it did pull out. Any thoughts on Zubimendi, or is this one of the extra sort of niggly injuries that we could sort of wait and see on?
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. And just to kind of add on that, when I was first became a physio, I was always a little skeptical of like kinesio tape, stuff like
Mm.
that, those kind of medial knee braces. But you're right, and research would back that up as well. Really important for like proprioceptive feedback to the affected area, but also yeah, just pain management control, which is massive for these players.
Absolutely. I think it is more so the proprioceptive feedback. It's never going to stop you fully get an injury, but it's going to tell your brain, like, okay, crap, I shouldn't get into that position. Let me just hold off a little bit. And that split second decision actually helps quite a bit. Research is never really going to find that, but if you think logistically, if you have a massive ankle strap, you're probably going to be less likely to pull into that position. But anyway, let's talk to the rest of the Arsenal injuries. We have a big list here. So we have Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel, Trossard, Saliba, Timber, and Ødegaard also pulled out or didn't go to international duty. Just a really brief summary. Declan Rice, Saka left without playing a minute. Looks like minor assessment issues. Um, More so evaluation than anything. We don't really have too much on them, so uh, we'll probably move on from that because I think it's more of an evaluation. Wait and see. Probably ready for the next game, if I'm being honest. Yeah, did you want to say something, sir?
Yeah, just to interject, I was going to say it would be interesting how things like this are handled going forward, maybe from an international level. Like I said, as far as I know, clubs get the final say just simply because they are, they're paying these guys, massive contracts.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's almost comical to kind of see, like you said, basically the entire starting lineup for Arsenal is
Yeah,
in some way being managed. So,
yeah.
I definitely don't blame Arsenal. I mean, that's like I said, you're fighting for Premier League title. Like, and these guys are playing in, more or less meaningless friendly games right now,
Mm.
when the World Cup is coming up anyway. So, um, it will be interesting to just see like how this is handled moving forward, for these for these separate instances.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty young, but I'm young enough to remember that Sir Alex Ferguson did this quite a bit in terms of just putting players out of international duties and sort of being left unsaid without too much diagnoses. This might be the same situation here, and it's taken quite a while for Arsenal to actually play I guess the evil tactics, the evil games to actually just, trot along because now it's serious. They'll be able to win the title. So again, we can't blame them. We can't blame them. However, yeah, it is a bit of a interesting one and definitely a skeptical one because, as you said, the whole starting lineup is out. So something to look forward to in terms of how this situation is handled. But yeah, to sum up the rest, we've got Saliba with ankle pain, right? Again, could be as minor as discomfort. We don't know. Trossard hip injury, so that probably a hip flexor tightness or discomfort. We don't really know again. Ødegaard, Timber, obviously they're more of legit injuries. They Arteta did say they were still a couple weeks away. So as we know, Timber had that groin injury, and Ødegaard will still be a week or two away. Based off those last three or four players, Jared, do you have anything to interject or want to comment on?
No, we hit on Timber a little bit last time that yeah, no major mechanism and injury stuff like that. So, but yeah, clearly there was some type of groin discomfort, minor groin injury. And my guess is Arteta is just being extra cautious with him as he's such a valuable piece to their lineup. And same with Odegaard, he's been on and off battling things. He had an MCL injury earlier in the year, so again, if
Mm,
you have a little extra time to take care of these injuries going into the final stretch of the season. Plus, they're still in Champions League, FA Cup. They got a lot of football left to play. So yeah, you can understand them, taking the conservative route.
absolutely. Like if I was to completely guess on Timber, I would say it was probably a minor strain. a week strain. And now that the international break came through, that just gives him an extra week and a half to rehab. So I would assume it would be nothing too sinister. But good to have them back for Arsenal somewhat soon, especially at this vital time. Moving on, we have John Stones, who also pulled out of England duty with a calf issue. We don't know what to think of here, but a calf issue can be as minor as tightness and can be as big as a strain. However, just with the comments, I just feel like it would be more so a very minor strain, or again, that calf niggle that we were talking about. Would you agree?
I would agree. And yeah, speaking of a player with an injury history, I mean, he for somehow barely ever plays for Man City these last couple of years.
Mm.
But from what you read online, everybody seems to think if he's healthy, he'll be starting for England in the World Cup. But yeah, likely just a minor calf strain that he's dealing with. One thing we didn't hit on earlier with Eze is, obviously these calf strains are very important for a player pushing off the ground, whether it's sprinting, jumping, anything like that, change of direction. I guess there's also a concern that it can start to lead into some Achilles issues, stuff like that.
Mm.
And obviously that can be, whether it's tendonitis or even a rupture, which can be a devastating injury. So I think with the cast specifically, yeah, you really got to manage that early on and make sure the player is right. Otherwise, it can definitely lead to some things down the line.
Absolutely. But that's completely agreed because I think I've only found that in my own personal journey, like in the last year, and that's something that I've really hampered on. Just it would be harder for the footballer to do so because they do so much training already, but it is an indication that something's weak or overloaded in that posterior chain. So it's very important for early intervention to actually be proceeded with. But yeah, great comments there. I do want to move on to more recent and more more recent news with Jadon Sancho first. We saw that he played, I think it was against Elche. I don't know how to say it. Sorry, Spanish fans. But Aston Villa versus Elche, where he fell on his right shoulder and it was pictured going off with a sling, or a shirt sling, which we commonly see with shoulder injuries. My comment on this is I did review the footage and it did seem like he did a tumble and he rolled over onto his right shoulder. Usually with these, it's less of a shoulder dislocation, but more so a direct impact of the AC joint. That's the acromioclavicular joint. And with these, in football at least, or soccer, as Jared likes to call it, we do see a little bit of a quicker recovery than a dislocation or subluxation. So hopefully in this case, we can see what I've seen in the past is a max of 4 weeks that they do miss out. So. I don't think it is a thing to worry about long term, but it is something that he will need to manage still. Any comments on AC joints, Jared?
Yeah, funny enough, Daniel Munez just had this looks like very similar injury, just
Mm.
same thing about a little over a month ago, and he's already back playing for Crystal Palace. He missed a couple games, but like you said, nothing long term. Funny enough, you said soccer versus football. This is a pretty common injury we see in American football with
Mm.
quarterbacks. And like you said, the big distinction is that kind of falling onto like a compacted shoulder versus like falling with like an open arm and stuff like that. That could lead to a more severe dislocation or anything. So yeah, no, agree with everything you said. Hopefully he's back within 2 to 3, 4 weeks. And can help Villa in their push for top four.
Absolutely. I do think it's that 2 to 4 weeks. It's mainly about pain management more than anything, in as opposed to sort of joint healing. Absolutely, that still needs to occur, but it is more so a painful injury as opposed to a really bad one. Um, So we want to move on to Matthias Tell just really quickly. He had to withdraw from French duty after an injury against Nottingham Forest for Spurs. Um, it looks like it's a groin injury because he did seem to hold that while coming off that area. Again, another one of those where in this type of at this point of the season, a lot of muscular fatigue, a lot of muscular discomfort, a lot of muscular strain injuries. And it seems like Matthias Tell has seen the brunt of it, especially with his pick up and load as well, because he is one of the only wingers left for Tottenham, really. But yeah, absolutely. A groin strain or a groin tightness issue is what seems to be the problem here. Jared, do you agree? And is there anything to add on that?
No, nothing too much major, like in terms of diagnosing stuff like that. Um, I don't know if you saw this today, but I guess the current Tottenham manager Tudor, I guess
Mm,
he is now gone as well. So
yeah.
I mean, we've talked about things in terms of tactical changes, but from a player's perspective, and even just a sports medicine perspective, yeah, it must be tough having rotating managers like they're having a lot of disarray. So it's like, these little things that we don't think of, just watching as fans, but working from like a sports medicine perspective is like, wow, it's like you get all these new managers in and out. It's like these players dealing with various injuries. I can only imagine what the entire staff is going through right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's honestly, I would not want to be in that changing room at the moment with a lot of things happening. And unfortunate events of Tudor also losing I think it was his father. Um
Yeah, I did see that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So honestly, just a bad place to be at the moment, and
Yeah.
all respect to him. But yeah, Tottenham in a sticky situation. I mean, it's great news that we've seen Madison on the pitch after returning from his ACL, or I guess in rehab from his ACL. He tore it in August last year, so it's about this time of year where we do see snapshots of players who've torn their ACL early on in the season return back to training, and it's completely normal. Like around the 6 to 7 month mark, we do see players return to sport specific stuff. So it's not unusual and it's completely expected. But I guess whenever you see players come back to the pitch like Madison said in his YouTube channel, you get a little bit excited and you're like, okay, they're ahead of schedule. But again, returning from an ACL is a completely multifactorial thing. Jared, do you want to speak about the experiences of? Is this expected? Is this expected that Madison's coming back at, or you can see sort of snapshots of him on the pitch now?
No, absolutely. And the biggest thing is, of course, practice in a controlled environment versus a, reactive, unpredictable game environment. It's for anyone who's played sports, yeah, you just know, when you go from a practice to a game, it's just a different speed. And when you figure with a Premier League level match, it's like that much more. But no,
Hmm.
I'd agree. At least here in America, gold standard for return to play time is usually at least 9 months. But people are jogging within 3 to 4 months, so it's,
Hmm.
yeah, like you said, to see him on the field doing, isolated drills, jogging, running, passing, stuff like that, shooting. Yeah, definitely completely normal. Now he needs to work on these next few months of just getting into, practice situations, rondo, stuff like that, before he starts transitioning to 7-on-7s, 11v11s, and then, hopefully, we'll see him at the very start of next season right away.
Absolutely. I wonder if England will pick him for the World Cup, but I very much doubt it.
Yeah.
Um,
They're
but
just
yeah.
they're so loaded on talent that it's like, yeah, I mean, I'd be shocked if, I mean, we were just talking about Eze. I mean, Eze
Mm,
might not even make it, you know what I mean? So like it's
yeah,
crazy.
absolutely. And that 10 position for England is an interesting one. They have so many players, but seems to be a lot of them are either injured or out of form. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, anyway, we do want to move on to Hugo Ekitike. Do you want to take this one away? Seems like you know more about it than I do.
Yeah, so funny enough, I was in Liverpool. This was during the day for before the Everton game, but so obviously the Liverpool match was on, and we were in transit to get to a pub after going to see Anfield, and then I look at my phone, and I'm like, oh, I was like, that's weird, like an 8 minute sub, and I looked, and it was like a TK, and then when you kind of read things online, you see the footage, stuff like that. It seemed like it was more of just a straight up leg contusion, where the classic dead leg as they call it. So. Um, Obviously, in these situations, there's no specific tissue injury. It's more of just like a pain management thing. So, we're never going to sit here and judge anyone's pain tolerance, stuff like that. But I can understand from a fan's perspective when you hear like, oh, like he didn't pull a muscle, he didn't roll his ankle, he didn't tear his knee ligaments, he just got hit in the leg. But they can be extremely painful, and you figure, okay, if it's in the hip, if it's in the quad, whatever, that's going to affect his ability to run. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
as we just talked about earlier, it's, if you start compensating somewhere because one area is in discomfort, then that could potentially lead to another injury. So again, from a fan perspective, I can understand like the frustration. They're fighting for top four, stuff like that. Get subbed off in 10 minutes, but you know, when there's pain involved and affecting other tissue, yeah, it's not a bad idea to be over cautious or conservative.
Absolutely, and again, at this point of the season, we're going to see a lot of players have mu like muscular contusions, muscular strains, and it's completely expected. We're going to see a lot of players pull out of international duty and just be rested for games because players do burn out with this amount of games in the season. So, again, a painful contusion is honestly probably the least of his anyone's issues at the moment. So, shout out to Ekitike for coming off. But yeah, we're gonna move on to more, I guess, older news, but still relevant talking point in Reece James. He played the full 90 minutes versus Newcastle on March 14th, and a couple of days later, a 6 week layoff just came out of nowhere, and it was a hamstring injury. Jared, you're writing a piece, and I know it's uploaded right now, which we'll put onto the page this week. With Reece James, his injury history is definitely something as a talking point, just because of how much form he was building up to this point. Do you want to talk more about his issue at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll do my best not to spoil the article too much, so that way you actually you all go on and read it. But yeah, definitely playing some of his best football that he has in the past few years. What was interesting under Maresca when he was there was he was playing more of an inverted role, inverted fullback role. So definitely playing more centrally, less of like that repetitive sprinting on the wing, stuff like that. Um, Although it's funny because that, passing and crossing is probably his best attribute. So Chelsea definitely missed that at times. Um, Maresca gets sacked, bring in Rosenier. He likes to play that traditional, more wing-back system. We've seen James go out there a little bit more since he's taken over. He ended up starting before he got hurt, starting the last 5 of 6 matches that they have. So you wonder, sad to say, but with his injury history, was that just too much for him right now, especially with the new positional change, stuff like that? So yeah, definitely as a Chelsea fan and just a fan of Reece James, definitely tough to see because you can imagine like the mental strain that I'm sure has been put on him going through all these injuries, stuff like that.
Mm.
But I do believe there is like a strong tactical component that's tied into this. Like I said, I won't spoil too much because I would like y'all to read the article, but just know, he has moved from more of that inverted central position to a little bit of more of that outside traditional wingback position. So definitely something to keep an eye on when he comes back. Will he be put back into that more inverted role, or is it Rozier wants to stick with this system and he'll be playing more on the wing again?
Absolutely. It's something that people don't really talk about, which is why the Substack's even a thing. Like the tactical changes do play a part in injury and layoffs so much. And we see similar stuff for as more like Trent Alexander-Arnold. He used to play that exact role, and if anything, he invented that role in terms of that inverted fullback, crossy, passy type of fullback. But as soon as he did change systems and you saw him play more of a traditional fullback or wingback role, that's where injuries came occur and all these niggles came about. So you really you really question whether it's worth it for an inverted fullback to go straight into a traditional fullback straight away, and how long do we actually take them from that current position into easing them into that traditional position? So it's definitely a talking point, and it's something to consider for coaches, I would say, more so than they consider already. Again, but we're not professionals, so we're not professional coaches, but at least we've got that medical background to sort of see that it does correlate to more injury issues. So definitely a talking point. But apart from that, I think that's about it in terms of the injuries we need to cover. We did a pretty good job there. Um, but Jared, do you want to sum up stuff that we've sort of gone through already, or anything to add before we move on to other stuff?
No, I mean, I obviously just the as we call it in America, the business end of the season. You know, you got the Champions League going into its final stages, FA Cup final stages. Obviously, there's still a lot to play in the Premier League between the top and the bottom. You know, top four, all that stuff. So,
Mm.
it'll be very exciting to watch as a fan. But yeah, it'll be interesting just how players are who are returning from injuries, how they're managed. You know, what players pick up new injuries, stuff like that. So. Um, Definitely a ton to watch for, and you know, not that we ever love to see anyone get injured, but yeah, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about over the next several weeks as the season concludes.
Absolutely, and leading into the World Cup as well. So, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, listening to the second roundup. We're gonna ask Jared a really quick question at the end, just more so to get to know him better and me better. So, a little bit of fun towards the end. So, just a quick question, Jared. Because as you guys might not know, but he is a or former and is sort of building up a clinic now, but is a clinical director. And when he was one and was doing a lot of the interviews, his question would be, "What would your last meal be?" So let's turn the tables around and ask you, what would your last meal be, Jared?
Easy, anything buffalo chicken related.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Do you guys
Yeah,
have that in Australia over there?
it's a
Yes.
thing, but it's more
All
so
right.
like a meal prep thing as opposed to like, fast food. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here in America, we obviously eat all the fattest versions of every food and the most unhealthy of
I didn't say
everything. I'll say, yeah, I'll say. Buffalo chicken subs and buffalo chicken pizzas are a really big thing. So
Okay.
without a doubt, that will always be my answer. So
Yeah.
how about yourself?
Well, I'm not sure whether you know this, but I'm half Turkish. So,
Okay.
um, a big thing for me and my favorite cuisine is Mediterranean or Middle Eastern. So, my last meal would probably be some sort of chicken shish
Okay.
kebab plate.
I like it. I like it.
And in Sydney, we're actually very multicultural. So you get a ton of different cuisines, and everyone brings their type of food. And there's so many of each nationality or ethnicity in terms of plate-based food that you sort of have to compete with each other. So
Yeah, yeah,
we're in a pretty good region in terms of food, and the best sheesh plates are honestly amazing here. I'm sure they don't compare to Middle Eastern traditional plates like around Turkey, etc. But yeah, that I'm frothing even thinking about it at the moment. So yeah,
I
that would
love
be my
it.
last meal. What do you think?
Hey, no, it's funny because when you go to like places like Ireland and the UK, stuff like that, a lot of people will say that there is a big Mediterranean kind of
Mm,
population there. We saw a ton of places that, just
yeah.
walking on the streets, stuff like that. So
Mm,
yeah, definitely a worldwide cuisine for sure. And yeah, I would definitely rate that pretty high as well, but
absolutely.
just not over buffalo chicken. So.
Fair
I
enough.
will add too for listeners. Yeah, I mean, we obviously are going to talk mostly football stuff like that, but
Yeah,
if you have any kind of random, kind of goofy questions that you want to throw to us, yeah, we'll try to mix it up at the end moving
cool.
forward. So,
Yeah, I did a pretty bad job in posting the questions like an hour before this, but seems to be a lot of football related ones after the international break with not much clarity. So fair enough. Um, yeah, I mean, oh, also, do you want to shout out that guy that you sort of mentioned, the Irish guy that mentioned the account?
yeah. Yeah, so as one does in Dublin, you're out
Yeah.
pub hopping, stuff like that, and all of a sudden, I'm chatting with another American guy, and first of all, he was a Wolves fan, which is
Okay,
I
yeah,
thought was
interesting.
pretty funny. But
Yeah.
hey, props to him
Mm-mm.
for representing a team that has definitely struggled. But we were just chatting about just football and just stuff, and I said, hey, I've been working with this guy called Physio Scout. He's pretty well known, just kind of worldwide. Have you seen his stuff before? He's like, yeah. He's like, absolutely. So I'm like, oh, I was like, now you got to listen to her. Got to listen to the podcast, man. Now that
Mm.
you've met me and you know him, so
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
yeah, no,
It's
definitely.
actually pretty funny. About half a year ago, I was getting ready for my trip to Europe, or probably like 3 months ago, and the guy at my local gym recognized my face and was like, hey mate, are you a physio scout by any chance? And I was like, yeah. That is so random. I literally live around this area, so it's good to see that we get some reach wherever we
We're
go.
getting there, getting there. Yeah.
It's surprising, honestly, and yeah. Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed your trip. And
Thank you,
apart
thank
from
you.
that, I think that's a wrap. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for listening. Again, it's a big chunk of your day, so we appreciate it. In the future, if you have any questions, please feel free to follow Jared and I. But in terms of adding in questions, you'll see it on my Instagram story, you'll see it on Twitter, wherever you want to, just add in where there's goofy questions or more injury related questions. We'll have answers to all of them. So, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next week. Catch you later.